Hi everyone, this is Jason Burack of Wall Street for Main Street, and today Mo Dawoud and I are joined by a special guest. Our special guest today is Byron King, who is a newsletter writer for Agora Financial. Byron has two newsletters out. He has the Energy and Scarcity Investor newsletter and also the Outstanding Investments newsletter. And Byron also has a lot of experience as a geologist in the oil and gas and mining industries. How are you doing today, Byron?
I'm doing just great. It's nice to talk with you. Thank you for letting me be with you.
Well, thank you for coming on, Byron. We appreciate your time. Well, one of the first topics we'd like to discuss with you, since you're a geologist and you traveled around the world visiting a lot of mining companies and their sites, we wanted to discuss the importance of geopolitics when it comes to investing. I know when I invest in the mining industry, one of the countries I try to avoid is Africa because of the political unstable environment going on in various countries and a lot of big government and nationalizing talk going on there that kind of makes me nervous all the time. So I usually avoid that country. So what about you, Byron? What tip or advice you give to people when it comes to geopolitics and investing in the mining industry?
Well, it depends, first of all, on your risk level and what is it that you want out of a particular investment. I mean, if you want to invest in coal mining, for example, and you think that there's money in coal mining, you can invest in the U.S. and Canada, and you really don't have to go around the world to invest in coal mining somewhere. If you want to invest in platinum, for example, you're going to have to go to South Africa. Sorry to say that, but I mean, there are a few other investments that are not in South Africa, but for the most part, the biggest and the best platinum players in the world are in South Africa. So it depends on your risk tolerance and what it is that you want. When it comes to Africa, there are dozens of countries there. Every single one of them has a different risk profile. I mean, you hear the horror stories out of places like Zimbabwe. You hear other stories that make you wonder about what's going on in South Africa. Is it okay? Is it declining? What's going to happen there in the future? They're right next to South Africa, though, is the country of Namibia. And I was just down in Namibia about 3 weeks ago, and I thought Namibia was fabulous. I think it has a fabulous investment climate, and so really, within that southern African cone, you go from Zimbabwe, which is just an absolute basket case, to South Africa, which is iffy one way or the other, and then to Namibia, which is in great shape. Then north of Namibia, you've got Angola, where you've got immense, giant world global companies, Chevron and Petrobras and BP, drilling and working and investing in Angola. So you have to be very you don't want to be dismissive of an entire region or an entire country unless before you really get into what are your goals and what's your risk tolerance.
Now, Byron, do you think it's on the resource companies to be environmentally responsible, to use best practices way above the standards of each of the countries, to use the best possible practices and demonstrate that, and then reinvest the money into the communities, like put in schools and create a good sense of community development with the local economies there? Because unlike what the environmentalists say mining's evil, we shouldn't do any of it, but everything that's not grown has to be mined, and we need natural resources on this planet to make the specialized things we need. So do you think then that the mining companies have to demonstrate this, or do you think this is a role that government should be playing?
Well, you're hitting the nail on the head when you say that if you don't pluck it off a tree or grow it, or if it doesn't sort of roll downhill at you and fall from the sky, you do have to dig it out of the ground. You have to dig it, or you have to pump it. You have to do something. So people who say, we shouldn't mine, I just don't know what to tell them.
I think most of them are hypocrites.
Well, yeah, I suppose you could say that. I mean, okay, pal, give up your car, give up jet travel, Don't heat your house in the winter. Don't cool it in the summer.
No smartphones. No Apple laptops. No hybrid cars.
Well, no food. I mean, that lettuce that you had for lunch this afternoon, that's 2,000-mile Caesar salad you just had there, pal. Where do you think that lettuce came from? Unless you grew it in your backyard, it probably came on a truck from California or Texas or Florida or something like that. So anyhow, but in terms of what do the mining industry have to do? What does the mining industry have to do? For the most part in this world, if you are in the extractive industry, if you are in the oil business, if you're in the mining business, and you go into another country to work, you had better walk in there planning to use best practices on everything. You don't think that there's one set of standards in the United States or Canada or Western Europe, and then there's no set of standards in some developing country, some emerging market, on the far side of nowhere. If you go there thinking you can get away with that, you're in the wrong business, and you'll be out of that business pretty quickly if you're not in jail someplace. And don't ask me to post your bail, because I won't. So my view is that the mining companies, the oil companies that go places, do bring best global practices. I mean, a big company like Chevron, for example. 2 months ago, I was in South Africa. I visited a Chevron oil refinery just north of Cape Town. This Chevron oil refinery works at the same level of environmental compliance for everything, for water, for air emissions, for on-site waste that they generate. It's the same level of standards in Cape Town, South Africa, as it would be in, say, Richmond, California. There's no distinction, no difference at all. So, and it is a higher level of standards than the local rules and regulations required. In fact, Chevron has, higher standards in California than the California, standards require. I mean, they don't just say if the minimum wasn't the minimum, it wouldn't be the minimum. It's not that. It's like, what's the best practice? So, and you see that in other things. You see that a lot of smaller companies, even the Canadian junior guys, they might be incorporated in Canada, but they're working in a developing country, an emerging market somewhere, in the mountains of South America or in the backwaters of Africa or whatever. They do everything they can to have their developments be environmentally, under control. I mean, if you're going to move Earth, you're going to move Earth. I mean, but you have to move it under control. And then the entire development cycle that goes with that. I mean, you need to build roads, you need to put power lines, put water lines. You're going to wind up building a clinic or a hospital. You're going to wind up building schools. And it's part of the feedback. In one sense, it's what you are paying the host government. It's what you're paying to the local people to improve their lives and give them a stake in your development. And on the other hand, it's good business too. I mean, because if you build a clinic or if you build a school, those people who you help stay healthy and those people who you help to educate, they're going to come. They're going to work for you, and they're going to be better employees, and they're going to build an entire economy around what it is that you're doing. So, but the olden days of mining companies going in someplace and just strip the mountain off and leave a pile of acidified waste, draining into the river, killing all the fish and destroying all the agriculture. That's a myth from the past. And I'm not going to say that you can't find examples of that in the world. I'm sure you can. And in fact, some of the Chinese developments are something like that I've seen. But you probably won't find it in any reputable development by a reputable Western company.
Now, do you think that's a private sector solution, Byron, to avoid like a lawsuit?
It's private sector, but in the sense that when you're an outside investor coming into a country, you are going to work with the governments. You're going to work with the host governments. You're going to work with the. In fact, you the outsider might come into a country. You might have to help the government set up a regulatory authority that you can work with. I mean, you don't want to just go in there and wing it and do it all on your own. I mean, the idea that you're going to do this in a vacuum is actually dangerous to your investment, because if it comes to a point where there is a problem, who do you turn to? Who who are your stakeholders unless you have brought the local people at the individual level, at the local government level, the regional government level, the national government level, and even the NGOs, even the non-government organizations, unless you've brought them into your project in some way that you have a respectful dialogue and a respectful working relationship with them, you're laying a minefield for yourself. So it's really best to go in there and work with everybody who has a stake in it. I assure you, there's enough people in this world that somebody's going to staff every level of oversight. So you may as well figure out who that is, and you may as well develop a relationship with them. Get their phone numbers on your speed dial.
That's a great point, Byron. Well, one country where the environmentalists are making a lot of noise is Peru. Just recently, Peru had an election, and the leftist Humala won the election, and he promised windfall taxes, quote, on the mining industry. In fact, when he got elected, mining companies that had mined in Peru just went on a downtrend. Especially one mining company, I won't mention the name of it, because they had two mines in Peru, and one of them was halted production because of a alleged environmental concern regarding them polluting their water. And in Peru, a big chunk of the GDP comes from the mining industry. And I'm just asking you, do you think Peru will go down a road to what Bolivia has become when Chavez took over?
Venezuela, yeah.
Venezuela, sorry. Yeah.
In a country like Peru, where you made the point, you said this, the mining industry composes a large percentage of the GDP. I've heard numbers like it's over 20% of GDP is mining, and then much of the foreign direct investment into Peru is related to either setting up new operations or expanding the existing operations. So I think what I'd say on that is that when somebody's running for office, they say things that they need to get the votes to win the election, and if populism is a theme that will win the election, people will say populist sounding things. But once they get into office, and once they have the responsibility to govern, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the smart ones who are not the true dyed-in-the-wool ideologues, they sit down with the mining side of the house and with the foreign direct investment side of the house, and they say, okay, what are we going to do here? How are we going to work this out? And the people cut a deal. If you're already invested in Peru, it's not like you can pick up the mine and move it someplace else. At the same time, if you are the government and you think you're just going to walk into some operation and nationalize it and take it over, the history of resource extraction is littered with failed efforts where the governments took over mines, mills, factories, oil production, gas production, things like that, and literally drove it into the dirt. I would, case in point would be, you mentioned Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. The guy has made an utter mishmash of the Venezuelan energy sector. Venezuela has among the largest oil resources in the world. It's not high quality sweet light crude oil. A lot of it's heavy oil, this tarry kind of stuff, bitumen. It's even asphalt, but it is recoverable and under with the right technology and the right kind of capital investment. And Hugo Chavez has utterly wrecked the Venezuelan oil sector. Now, in terms of unintended benefits or unintended consequences, his politicization of the Venezuelan national oil company, PDVSA, has driven hundreds, actually thousands when I think about it, of geologists and engineers out of Venezuela into other countries. And that has sparked something of a boom elsewhere. I mean, you hear really nice things about the resource sector in Colombia right now. The nation of Colombia is enjoying a resource boom in terms of oil drilling, gas drilling, mining of all sorts of substances, gold, silver, copper, precious gems, you name it. Colombia's got it. It's an incredible geological treasure house. A lot of that's happening with Venezuelan talent that got chased out of the country by Hugo Chavez. So anyhow, you want to be careful, when you read the headline that so and so won an election. Well, okay, now. Where's this going to go? How's it going to work out? Maybe the guy's smart enough to sit down and work with the private industries there. If he's not smart enough, if he pulls a Hugo Chavez and tries to nationalize everything and just live the life of the endless populist or something, it all comes around.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an economic problem. Chavez hasn't created any jobs like what he promised. He hasn't helped his poor people, rise out of poverty. And the natural resource, these countries, I mean, you need the money coming in, the trickle-down effect, where the money comes in from natural resources, and it goes to those secondary industries. It goes to those other industries that provide value added on top of the mining.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's an entire value chain that develops with a resource extraction sector. And, sure, you begin with the mouth of the mine. There's a hole in the ground, and you got guys go down there and they drill their holes, they put their explosives, and they blast the stuff out. But, then you've got heavy equipment, you've got machinery, you've got a chemicals industry, just, for the explosives and things like that. You've got service industries that support this. And again, one job in the mine could create and support 3, 4, 5 other jobs directly related to that mining, and then those 3 or 4 or 5 other jobs could support another 10 or 15 jobs in other things, whether it's the grocery store or the shoe store or whatever, so there's an entire
the restaurant around the mine.
Well, yeah. I mean, the guys have to eat breakfast on their way to work, and they want to eat dinner on the way home. And there might even be a tavern that sells them a cerveza along the way. So that you can create a lot of economic food chain, out of resource extraction. I mean, here in the U.S., for example, in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is booming. In its development of the Marcellus Shale. Let's go from third world and developing countries to the U.S. The Marcellus development in Pennsylvania is booming because it happened under the radar of the politicians. Nobody knew that it was happening until it had happened, so they couldn't tax it, regulate it, control it, shut it down until it had become an industry that was so important that they realized they had better not shut it down. When Governor Tom Corbett took office about 6 or 7 months ago, first thing he did was I heard him tell the story about 3 months ago. I heard the governor give a talk. First thing he did when he came to office in Pennsylvania, he went to the Department of Revenue and said, how many people are working in Marcellus development? I mean, how much economic impact is there? So, the revenue people, I mean, this is the tax collectors. I mean, they ought to know who's doing what. I mean, they collect taxes and everything. So they went away. They came back a couple weeks later and said, Governor, first thing you got to understand is that on your Pennsylvania tax return, there's no block that you check that says, I work in Marcellus development. Okay, you understand that. But, in terms of, 5 or 6 years ago, how many people worked in the oil drilling industry? A couple thousand. How many people work in the oil drilling industry today? Over 30,000. How much money was being made, 5 years ago versus how much money is being made today. I mean, the average W-2, the average annual wage for somebody who directly works on a rig for a drilling company or a service company is something like $70,000 a year. That's a really good job in Pennsylvania. So, and then, there's 30,000 people directly employed in Marcellus, and there's probably 150,000 just right behind them, whether they're the truck drivers, the bulldozer drivers, the cement guys, the electricians, the pipe layers, that kind of stuff. So it's not even a developing world issue. I mean, it is a U.S. issue. We say, where are the jobs? I say, well, where are the jobs? I say, where's the energy development? I mean, we're doing a lot of development in Pennsylvania on Marcellus, and there's a lot of jobs on the rigs and on the on the truck drivers and in the steel mills that make the pipe and everything else. And I mean, if we did more energy development in the U.S., we'd have more jobs. As opposed to those horrible, sad, heartbreaking pictures you see of those job fairs where 10,000 people show up for 100 jobs or something, that kind of thing.
That's a great point. I want to move to another subject that you have a lot of expertise in, and that's geology. When I started to invest in the mining industry, one of the biggest hump I had to get over is reading drill results, which is not very easy to do. Takes a lot of practice and learning. But after getting used to it, it's very beneficial when investing in the mining industry because you need to know if the drill results are legit or is it worthwhile your investment. So what tip advice do you have regarding drill results? Since you're a geologist, you would know a whole lot about this.
Well, it gets back to something that Mark Twain said, from his days in the gold fields of California back in the 1850s. He said that the definition of a gold mine is a hole in the ground with a liar at one end. And it's humorous, and Mark Twain was a great American humorist, but there's certainly an element of truth to that. And for decades, it was probably true that whether it was a gold mine or a mine for a lot of other things, it was this sort of a dark art. What's down there? Well, you got to take the word of whoever, the promoter. And so there's a lot of promoters in the world who are a lot better promoters than they are at geology or building a mine or actually operating a mine. So I guess we do a little bit of more recent history. Back in the late 1990s, 1997, something like that, there was this huge scandal in the world mining industry about a company called Bre-X, which came out and said, "Oh, we have this fabulous, gold mine prospect in Indonesia. We got just millions and millions and millions of ounces." And Bre-X went from this little stock that was 15 cents a share or something. Doggone stock was up $100 or something like that. And then one day, the word sort of leaked out that there's no gold there. They basically salted the mine, as in they just threw some gold nuggets into the assay, of what they sent to the lab and everything, and these results came back with these incredible high, gold concentrations. But it was phony. It was all fake, and as it was, there's all sorts of suspicions, and the head geologist, allegedly committed suicide by jumping out of a helicopter into the jungle, and his body was never recovered, and all this kind. You can make a great movie out of it. What it did, though, was it utterly, completely crashed and wrecked the entire junior side of the mine development space, the investment space, for years. I mean, 6.
Sounds like it destroyed the Canadian economy too.
Oh, it definitely impacted the Canadian economy. It impacted Canadian, the whole securities side of the house in Canada. It tanked the stock markets. I mean, it just did terrible things in Canada and many other places, because a lot of these Canadian juniors, I mean, they list in the Canadian markets, they raise capital in North America, but they're not digging a hole in Canada. They're digging a hole in Africa, or they're digging a hole in Asia, they're digging a hole in South America, but if you can't raise the capital, you can't do anything. So anyhow, this Bre-X scandal was terrible. Well, so the stock exchange people up in Canada said, hey, we have to clean up our act here. We have to give people some assurance of what's going on here. So they wrote a whole new set of rules and regulations regarding promoting stocks and trading these resource stocks, and so you wind up with things like the Toronto Venture Exchange, where you have development type stocks. I mean, they have an ore body. They claim they do. They're developing it. They're drilling it up, but they're not a real mine. They're not a producing mine. Once you become a producing mine, once you become a producing oil company, what have you, then you move from the Toronto Venture Exchange to the Toronto Exchange, which is kind of the big board of Canada, so to speak. Now, a lot of those Canadian junior guys are also cross-listing in the U.S. on the American Exchange or on the OTC or through pink sheets, things like that. But anyhow, but gets to your that's all background to your point about what about these drilling results and everything. Anymore, there are a lot more penalties for lying on your drilling results than there used to be. Although I suppose either jumping or getting thrown out of a helicopter. I guess that's the ultimate penalty if you screw it up badly. But don't think that doesn't happen, But it just maybe happens in a slightly more sophisticated way. So anymore, you can look at drill results. There's a form called a 43-101. And everybody calls it a 43-101. It's just that's the name of the document that companies file on a regular or updated basis with the stock exchanges in Canada, and that lists things like drilling results, drilling assays. It gives you an idea of what's out there. At some point, you still have to be smart enough to figure out what it is that they're saying. I mean, if you're investing in a gold mining company, you have to be able to look at a 43-101, and you have to be able to understand, what's the mineralogy of what they're talking about here. I mean, is it a sulfide ore? Is it an oxide ore? Is it a disseminated ore in what kind of rock? I mean, are we talking about ore that's spread through a solid basalt or a gabbro, or are we talking about ore that's somehow more easily mineable quartz vein? I mean, these are the kind of things that you have to develop your mental abilities and your skill sets to really read these things. Other things you have to be careful about are just sort of the sampling methodology. I mean, there are standard sampling methodologies out there for how to how often do you drill a hole, or how often do you take a sample, or if how do you gather and measure the things. There are ways that people fudge on that, though, and you want to be careful that you understand how that happens. It takes a serious level of understanding and of learning to get good at it. It takes a bunch of years, I would say, to get good at it. It's something that I write 2 newsletters. You mentioned them at the beginning. Outstanding Investments, which is big companies, and it's a very modest price point, it's like $49 a year, and then Energy and Scarcity Investor, which is a small cap type stocks, smaller, much more risky, more speculative type ideas. It's at a higher price point, but it's that risk reward sort of factor. But when I'm writing about companies, whether gold mining companies or uranium companies or oil companies or whatever, I'm looking at the documents that these guys are filing. So in a sense, I'd like to think that I offer the readers, value for their money, in the sense that I'm looking at these things too. I don't want to tell the readers to buy some gold mining company when I don't trust the drilling results. So I'm not going to tell them to look into some oil company when I don't trust the reserve calculation. We could talk about that for the whole interview, but I guess those are some of the things you ought to know, and some of the things you ought to understand about getting into these estimates that are put out by management.
Now, Byron, I want to talk more about like the 43-101, and I want to talk about how technology, some of the new technology like 3D modeling, and in the geophysics, using sonar, where they can literally, stick the sonar stuff underground, and they can actually, see the stuff underground with the oil and the gas and the mineralization. So can you talk about like how the technology has improved in the mining business just in the last few decades, and how the impact that's had, on the certainty now of what as actually in the ground?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother angle that we can jump off on that tangent. That's good. The modern technology, you said over the last couple of decades. Yeah, over the last couple of decades, but heck, over the last 3-4 years. I mean, the technology is allowing people to do things today that absolutely never could have done before. In the good old days, the way the old days, and where a lot of people's idea of mining is, because this is what they see in the movies or they see on television or something. Yeah, it's some grizzled old prospector, with missing a couple of fingers and with like, one eye, kind of swollen shut or something, and he's out there with his pick and his shovel looking for brown stains on the side of the mountain or something. And when he finds those brown stains, he just hacks away with that pick, and digs himself a hole. And when he gets to the hard rock, he puts a few sticks of dynamite in there and blasts away. That is like utter ancient, old-fashioned. I mean, if that's where you think mining is, wake up, pal, because reality has passed you by, and it's time to get on the good ship fast forward here, because you're out of it. All right, where mining is today is using incredible levels of technology. For the first place people do exploration anymore is in university libraries and government archives. I mean, because I assure you that the surface of the earth has been walked over, climbed over, flown over, picked over, sampled, assayed at a fairly respectable density. Pretty much everywhere that that is not covered by seawater. I mean, from the tip.
Except for North Korea, maybe, because they're not letting anyone in there.
Don't think the North Koreans don't know what they have either. I mean, the North Koreans actually have a couple of very intriguing mining projects that they're working on with their friends from the People's Republic of China. I've said this in my newsletter once or twice. I'm talking about things. How hard up do you have to be for a particular mineral to want to make a deal with the North Koreans to go there? But I mean, the North Koreans, they know what they got. But everybody knows where. I mean, the Soviets. They scoured the Soviet Union. I mean, in their 5-year state plans, they sent hundreds of thousands of geologists across that country, from north to south, east to west, across 11 time zones to see what's in that country. What was in that country? Africa, maybe not so much. Parts of South America, maybe not so much. But still, the first place people go to explore is the archives. Is the point I want to make. Then comes historic mining. People will go back to where there was historical mining. They will take the original mining data, and the original mines from way back when was all about chasing the ore body, chasing the veins. The chief geophysical instrument was called the eyeball, where the miners would see the vein going this way or that way. They'd dig out the ore. When the vein is pinched out or whatever, they'd drill a couple of holes, blast away, find the next part of the vein, chase the vein. Well, hopefully they kept good records of that, so that you can take that stuff today and you can put it in a three-dimensional geographic information system type of model, and you can build a 3D of the mine. And I've seen the results of doing that, where you take 100 years of historical mining data, you put it into a GIS system, and you build a mine model that all of a sudden tells you where all the other good stuff is that those old guys that they overlooked. Next thing that goes in there, the modern geophysics, modern magnetics, modern electrical, modern gravity surveys, things like that. You take your historical data, you mix it with the modern geophysics. All of a sudden, instead of a couple of different instead of just a couple of different holes in the ground from the historical mining, just because the old prospector saw a brown stain on the rock and dug away with his eyeballs, just chasing the vein. Now today you can put that together with modern geophysics and historical records, and you can build an entire mineral model on that. And then we get to the modern drilling techniques, where you got these diamond bits that can take these cores, and you can drill just thousands and thousands of feet. Remember last summer, when those guys got trapped in that copper mine down in Chile?
Yeah.
And I mean, they were under, what were they, like 2,000 feet or 3,000 feet or something? I mean, those guys were deep down there. Well, those guys with the drill, I mean, they didn't know where they were. No, the guys on the surface, they didn't know where those guys were. They could have been in any level at all. They didn't know if they were dead, alive, whatever. And then they started, drilling holes, and it was really just a matter of days. They put those drill holes down, 2,000 feet into the ground, and they found the chamber where the guys happened to be. Well, that's a rescue story, but the other way to look at it is that's a technology story too. That's pretty good drilling. The nice straight drilling where you know where your drill bit's going, and the same drilling that found those miners trapped in the mine. That's the same kind of drilling. The drill rigs, the drill bits, the drill cores that you're pulling out of the ground. That's the same kind of stuff that people are using. The same technology people are using for exploration. When you're not trying to save somebody's life, you're just looking for the gold mine, so to speak. So in between all this modern technology, we can do mining a heck of a lot better. You can find the ore body. You can define what it is you want to do. You can build that mine in a computer long before you ever put the first bulldozer or the first stick of dynamite or the first the first person on site, to actually, move the rock. So when you talk about is technology changing things? Yeah, technology is changing things for the better. It's fabulous with the kind of automated data processing you can do, the storage, the algorithms for processing geophysics, for seismic, things like that. I mean, you are doing things today that 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago were just pure science fiction.
Yeah, I think the accuracy, for the mining stuff that we're seeing, the 3D models and the resource estimates and the actual, you look on a PowerPoint presentation sometime and you see the actual veins like they're outlined, beautifully. It's just quite amazing, with the drill core is drilled right in. It's just amazing.
It's very impressive, and it's a synthesis of many disciplines. I mean, it's not just geology, it's not just geochemistry, it's not just geophysics. It's fundamental physics, it's math, it's the algorithms, it's signal processing, it's the computer guys, it's the software designers and the code writers, it's the people who build these incredibly powerful computer chips that can do mathematical algorithms. It's the people who design the mathematical algorithms and then convert that into a design on a computer chip. It's the people that build the machinery that can make computer chips that can do that kind of signal crunching and that kind of number crunching. I mean, it all comes together, and so it's all part of a highly complex system. When people say, oh, when they say, say mining is this or that, mining's bad or whatever, it's going, well, mining is so much better today than it used to be. It's so much more efficient. It's so much more accurate. It can be so much safer. It can be so much more environmentally benign. I mean, you know exactly where you want to go and exactly what you want to do. You don't want to move any rock that you don't otherwise have to move. And it's, the idea, the key to mining pretty much is cost per ton. I mean, whatever you can do to get that cost per ton down means that you can you want to get as much of the good stuff out and leave as much of the unnecessary stuff behind as you can possibly do. I mean, it's just searching for efficiencies, and we have to do it. I mean, it's a big world, 7 billion people, and a lot of those people are in what we talked about earlier, developing economies, emerging markets, and they want to live in. Yet that they want to live a resource intense lifestyle, just like people in the developed world. I mean, you take somebody in the U.S. Let's say somebody in the U.S. Let's just pick, they win the lottery and you give them $50,000. What are they going to do with it? They'll take a cruise on a Caribbean ship or something.
Buy a car, buy a boat.
Buy a car. Well, yeah, but you give $10,000 or $20,000 to somebody in a developing market, in an emerging economy. They're going to spend a lot less of that money on intangible things like services or Caribbean cruise or a vacation. They're going to spend more of it on things that actually weigh something when you pick them up. They're going to buy an air conditioner. They're going to buy a refrigerator. They're going to buy that car. I mean, if you're in America, how many? I mean, there's 250 million cars, trucks, etc. in the United States right now. I mean, there's 100 million households. I think the average household has 1.7 cars or something like that. How many more cars do you need? You go to other parts of the world, the average car per household is 0.05 or something. You go to a country like that, and you give people money, what are they going to do? They are going to buy a car. That's steel, that's rubber, that's copper, that's aluminum, that's plastic. So the
petroleum products. Yep.
The point is that people in the developing world want stuff. They don't want services. They don't want to pay down debt. They probably don't have any debt. Here in the U.S., we have lots of debt. You give people money. What do they do with it in the last couple of years? They pay down debt, which is a good thing because debt is not a good thing over the long term. You want to pay it down. But you got other parts of the world, they haven't got themselves into debt. So if they have money, they're going to buy something tangible with it, like a car, like an air conditioner, like a refrigerator. But anyway, to do that, you're going to need resources. You need copper, steel, aluminum, all those things.
Now, one of the biggest challenges for the natural resource industry, especially for the oil companies, like the one that do the deep water oil drilling, is infrastructure. And we're a big believer in peak oil, and there's a decline in production on onshore oil. And many of these big oil companies are now going offshore to find more oil. And one of the counter-arguments we hear about peak oil is, well, there's plenty of oil up in Antarctica. There's like 90 billion of barrels of oil up there. We can just drill that out. Or there's plenty of oil off the Pacific Ocean or the Gulf. Well, that's fine, but, you gotta drill it out. You gotta put it in a oil tanker, you got to ship it to the port, you got to refine it. There's a big cost regarding infrastructure, and people think like once they drill the oil, it magically appears in their gas tank in their car. So
that is I guess one of the problems of the oil industry is that most people's interaction with the oil industry comes once or twice a week when they pull into a gas station and they grab the pump and they stick it in their car and they squeeze a handle, and $30 or $40 or $50 or $60 or $70 later, they put the pump back on they put the little gas pump thing back on the machine, and they walk away thinking to themselves, man, that sure was a lot of money, and that's people's interaction with the oil industry, and actually you don't even see the product. How many times do you ever look at gasoline? You don't. You probably, if you live in most urban areas, you probably have a rubber gasket on the gas pump that goes over your gas tank that sucks the vapors back in and recycles them, and that's an air emissions issue. But because we don't want that stuff evaporating into the atmosphere. Okay, so the point I think you're saying is, let's talk about peak oil. We have peak oil if you're talking about $20, $30, $40, $50 oil. All that oil, that's gone. That's history. Forget it. You will not find $20, $30, $40 oil out there anymore. You might, here or there a little bit, but you're not going to find large quantities of it. In terms of how many hydrocarbons are there in the crust of the Earth, I assure you there are a lot of hydrocarbon molecules out there. The question is, can you get them out? At what price? At what level of technology? How are you going to make this whole thing work? And so what you're seeing across the energy industry, across the fossil fuel industry, is more of that technology that we were talking about with the mining industry. You are seeing modern versions of geology, geophysics, geochemistry, structural geology, aided and abetted by supercomputers, aided and abetted by incredible measuring equipment that can detect things down to the parts per billion, parts per trillion level in terms of geochemistry. Incredible technology in terms of measuring the strength of gravity in different places, measuring magnetic fields, measuring electrical fields, using satellite imagery, measuring spectral reflectivity, off of water surfaces or off of land surfaces, and using all of this, tying it all together in a systemic way, in a truly PhD level thinking, PhD postdoc, careers in earth science applications that are just utterly Star Trek in nature, to find the hydrocarbons that can somehow or another get turned into a refined product and that you can put in your gas tank without ever seeing them, and people still complain about the price. When we talk about things like you mentioned, oil in the Arctic and up in Alaska, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or something like that. Is there oil there? Do we know what's there? Yeah, we think there is. In the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, they want, the environmentalists, they won't let anybody drill a hole there, so you don't really know until you drill a hole. But according to all the geophysics and according to all the geology and according to everything that people know, they think there's a lot of oil there. And then but then the environmentalists come back and say, well, that's only 3 months worth of oil for America. Well, okay, that would be 3 months of oil if we literally shut down the rest of the oil industry everywhere else in the country, and all we did was drain this one field, in 3 months. Which that is an utterly ridiculous statement. That's not how it works. That's not how it happens. To drill for oil in Anwar is a 100-year prospect. We've been drilling in Prudhoe Bay since 1967. So where are we? What's that make it? 44 years. We're coming on 45 years drilling in Prudhoe Bay, and there's still a lot of oil coming out from Prudhoe Bay. I wish there was more, but in terms of what new technology is doing in terms of finding the overlooked oil, recovering the other oil that didn't come around the first time. Just the other day, Apache Oil Company, for example, announced that in an oil field in the North Sea called the Forties. Now, this is the granddaddy of North Sea oil fields. This field's been around for something like 40 years. Apache is actually increasing the oil output from this old oil field that was in decline, and I think it was BP sold it to Apache because we can't make any money off of it. Apache goes and applies new technology to this old oil field, and they're tripling the output from it. Or a couple of months ago, I was down in West Texas in the Permian Basin near Midland, Odessa, and this is an area that's been drilled up since the 1910s, like the end of World War I.
Spindle Top.
Well, that's East Texas.
Okay.
West Texas is a Permian Basin. They started drilling that after World War I, and all through the 1920s, 30s, 40s, we basically fought World War II using oil from West Texas, from the Permian Basin. So it's easy to look at that and say, oh, gee, I guess all that oil is gone. No, all that oil isn't gone. After 90 years of drilling there, they've got maybe 15% of the oil out of the Permian Basin. So what are they doing today? Well, I'll tell you exactly what they're doing because I was there and I saw it. I was a guest of the Chevron Oil Company who showed me. They are pumping carbon dioxide down there. They're fracking these super hard limestones that never used to produce any oil. They are doing all sorts of advanced secondary, tertiary, fourth generation technologies to enhance the oil recovery out of these old oil fields. And so when people say, say peak oil, yeah, there is peak oil at 30, 40, 50 bucks a barrel. If there's no peak oil at 100 bucks a barrel, there's no peak oil at 200 bucks a barrel, not yet. In a cosmic, large-scale sense, yes, there is such a thing as peak oil. Yes, mankind will have to deal with it over the next, century or two. It doesn't mean that we don't have a problem today. Of course, we have a problem today. We don't like. There's not, shall we say, enough oil to go around at 75 bucks a barrel, so we don't pay 75 bucks a barrel. We're paying 105 bucks a barrel. And what's the big difference? What's the problem? Well, China is the world's second largest oil importer. That's why. And at the rate they're going, China's going to be the world's largest oil consumer. One of the statistics, or one of the arguments that I just despise. I hate this argument is when people say things like, well, the United States has 4% of the world's people, but we use 25% of the world's oil. Well, first of all, that's not true. We might have 4% of the world's people, but we're not using 25% of the world's oil. Who says that? Well, President Obama, he's got that number wrong. The U.S. actually is a very efficient user of oil, and it's not 25% of the world's oil. The other thing is, just because your population is what it is doesn't mean that you should only use a proportionate amount of the world's energy. Where's the logic in that? That's not logical. It makes no sense. You're comparing apples and oranges. Thirdly, much of that energy that we use in the U.S., depending on oil, gas, I mean, a third to a half of it is domestic production. We get a whole bunch more from Canada, and so it's not as bad as it sounds. Even if you do think that it's bad, it's not as bad as it sounds. And the U.S. economy, in terms of how much GDP we get out of a barrel of oil, we're probably among the most efficient users of oil in the world. I mean, the rest of the world should strive to be as efficient in their use of oil and energy as we are in the U.S. I mean, maybe we're not as efficient as Japan. I mean, they're extremely efficient in everything except maybe running their nuclear power plants. But there is a lot of future in the fossil fuels industry. There's a lot of technology that's opening up entire new vistas, and some of the best vistas that are opening up are existing known oil production. The best place, there's an expression in geology and in the mining and the extractive industry. Best place to build a mine is next to another mine. The best place to look for oil is next to another oil field. I mean, you've got historic production, you've got known production, you got source rocks, you've got migration, you've got reservoir rocks, you've got caps that hold everything together. So you've got one field here, now go look for another field somewhere else. So you're seeing that. You're seeing it in the U.S. You're seeing it across the world. I mean, one country that's doing really great things with its oil industry right now doesn't get much respect for it is Russia. Russia is doing fabulous things with its oil industry. It's just, in the days of the Soviet Union, they found so much oil in the Soviet Union that unless it was a supergiant oil field, they didn't even bother to develop it. They just, okay, yeah, that's nice, but it's not big enough. Let's move on. Let's go find some other oil fields. And so a lot of right now, Russia's going back and filling in all those, doing a lot of infill drilling in areas that were bypassed in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. There's a great story there. Actually, in one of the other articles or one of the other newsletters that I've written for, called Whiskey and Gunpowder, I actually wrote an obituary of the former Minister of Energy of the Soviet Union, a guy named Nikolai Babakov. He died a couple of years ago, but he was Stalin's energy minister, and he wound up on the Central Planning Committee of the Soviet Union. I mean, he was responsible for the Soviets having hundreds of thousands of geologists and engineers out there drilling up oil. And the Soviet Union was an energy powerhouse, and then it had problems in the 80s. It stopped being an energy powerhouse. That's one of the reasons why the Soviet Union imploded. But I digress, I guess. So lots of technology out there finding lots of oil, and but it takes technology and it takes money to do all of this. And people who want to stand in the way of supplying money to the energy industry or allowing technology to develop or halting access to prospective areas, I mean, they're cutting the energy throat of the country as we look forward.
Those are some great points, Byron. I mean, you could talk forever. You were just quoting all these great statistics off, and that 5%, 25% of the world's natural resources. I've heard that quote, so many times. I just have it memorized.
Yeah, that makes no sense. There is no logic in, how much of the population of the world is the U.S. versus how much energy we use to create our GDP. All I can say about the rest of the world is, go out and make your own GDP. Go out and get your own. Go out and build your own economy, and in some respects, people are. I mean, that is one of the problems. I mean, China's developing, India's developing, Brazil's developing, but as Brazil develops, guess what? Brazil goes offshore. What do they find? Oil. How much? A lot of it. As China develops, what are they doing? Well, guess what? China has more shale gas resources in China than we do here in the United States. I mean, China's going to develop, and China's going to use a lot of energy, and China's going to, make a lot of energy production in its own country over the next, 10, 20, 30, 50 years. I mean, it's a generational kind of thing. And but when people, and then when you look at what the rest of the world versus U.S. population, I mean, why should the U.S. Voluntarily constrain its energy consumption just based on the fact that other countries in the world can't control their population growth? Sorry, but I don't want to hear that argument. That doesn't make any sense to me either.
Yeah, and if we stop using oil so abruptly too, Brian, and we just, close off the valve there, and, we switch to hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles or whatever, I mean, the environmentalists aren't even, weighing the consequences of the other resources that we'd have to start using. Look at the amount of rare earths we'd have to use. Look at the amount of, coal we'd have to use to plug in those hybrids and the electric vehicles into the outlet.
Well, what you're getting into there is this idea that somehow or another we're going to replace the existing way we do business with a different way of doing business, but it's going to be the same way of doing business, although different. Instead of internal combustion engines, we're going to use electric cars. Well, okay, how many electric cars get, built in the United States, every year? I mean, could it be as many as, 5 or 10,000 perhaps? I mean, it's just not that many, Whereas how many cars get sold in this country every year? Could it be, 7 million, 8 million, something like that? That's new cars. When you throw in the used car fleet, there's 250 million cars and trucks in the U.S. more or less. I mean, you could give a very ballpark number. I mean, if somehow you could snap your fingers and create the industrial capability to build, give me a number, 2 million electric cars a year, let's say. Okay, we're going to go from a few thousand a year to 2 million overnight because you're such a cool guy that you snapped your fingers and you made it happen. Okay, let's just grant that 2 million electric cars a year in a nation of 250 million vehicles. Okay, so that'll take us 125 years to switch out the fleet to. Come on. Yeah, I mean, you see the ridiculousness.
And the infrastructure is not in place, and it creates other additional resource problems.
Well, yeah, and if you want to have electric cars, let's say, what's the car? The Tesla car. It runs on lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are nice, but they're named wrong. They shouldn't call them lithium batteries. They should call them graphite batteries because there's more graphite in a lithium battery than there is lithium. So the next question is, oh, great, how much graphite is there? I assure you there is not enough. Where do we get our graphite from? Well, we get about 60% of it from, China, and the rest of it comes from other places in the world. Are there graphite deposits in the U.S. and Canada? Yeah. Do they need, are they developed?
No.
Not really. Are they going to get developed? Well, yeah. Could we, are we going to develop them overnight? Nope, doesn't work like that. Can't develop this stuff overnight. It takes a couple of years, okay. And takes a couple of years, takes a lot of money, takes capital, takes human skills, human infrastructure, you mentioned rare earths. Are we going to do rare earths? China runs 97% of the world's rare earth business, and that's one of my specialties. I'm one of the investment world's go-to guys on the rare earth issue. And I know all about rare earths, and I assure you that here in the West, here in the U.S., here in Canada, there are simply not enough people who understand rare earths to do it and do it right and do it, let alone do it fast. And the people who are trying to do it they face that problem every single day of not enough people, not enough human skills out there, and it takes an entire food chain, an entire industrial infrastructure, an entire infrastructure of human skills and human knowledge to make this stuff work. Up until not very long ago, do you want to know how many university-level programs there were in rare earth metallurgy? I'll tell
outside of China?
Outside of China. In the U.S. and Canada, how many university level? There was zero. There were zero of them. You want to know how many there are now? You just got that number right. There was one. There's one. It's at the Colorado School of Mines. And which is not to say that there aren't smart people in the U.S. and Canada, that there's not smart chemists and material scientists and physical chemists and physicists who I'm sure could do wonderful, wonderful things, if they were funded and if they were directed and if there was a future in research programs, towards developing rare earths and rare earths metallurgy. It's all out there to be done, but we're not doing it. And to the extent we are doing it, we're not doing very much of it. We're not doing it very fast. I was talking to this guy here. I got to give you a really good anecdote. This guy was telling me about he visited a Chinese research institute that specializes in rare earths. And I said, how many people work there? And he says, this particular institute had about 2,000. I said, oh my goodness. I said, I'm thinking, okay, well, who does what? How many people were what? And he said, there's probably about 200 people with PhDs. I'm like, oh my God, that's probably more people with PhDs in rare earths than have been granted in the U.S. in like the last 50 years or something. They had 200 people working at this one institute in China with PhDs, and then the other people with master's degrees and advanced technical degrees and stuff. There's probably about 800 of those. So there's like 1,000 people at at the top levels of science and technology working at this institute, and then there's another 1,000 people who are like the technicians, the electricians and the model builders and the glass blowers and stuff like that. All the people who support R&D at a big institute like that. And then this is another thing that was really cool. Aside from just the numbers game of how many people are doing what, the director of that institute insisted that everybody show up for work every morning at something like 8 in the morning, and he wouldn't let them go home until 9 o'clock at night. So these guys are working 13-hour days, 5.5 days a week at their research institute to do research on rare earths. Now, even if these people are, just not that smart, which I don't believe because I think they probably are pretty smart. Even if every negative assumption and every negative stereotype you want to throw at this concept is true. I mean, if you have 2,000 people working 13 hours a day, 5.5 days a week, directed towards a particular goal in a particular field. In this case, it's rare earths. You're going to figure something out. You're going to find something. So they're working harder. They're working longer. They're working smarter. They're just plain working.
Sounds like a Chinese Manhattan Project.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. One of the undertones, one of the things that people talk about in the rare earths business, when we look at how tightly China's controlling its rare earths exports and how they're restricting things and what they're building towards the future, a lot of people wonder, what do the Chinese know about the future need and the future uses of rare earths that we don't know because we haven't figured it out? I mean, they don't publish all their research. I mean, the research that they do publish, some of it's in English, most of it's in Chinese. Most people don't read most research that's published in Chinese. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that is either published privately or it's not published in China because it's considered a state secret. So what do they know that we don't even begin to suspect about future needs, future demands, future trends? So it's worth thinking about. It's worth asking the question. And if you're of a paranoid bent, it's worth worrying about because what the heck? It's only something that could possibly control the future destiny of the world.
Well, listen, Byron, thank you for coming on to the Wall Street from Main Street podcast. We appreciate you coming to give us your insight. We'll definitely have you back on to discuss more on rare earths. Just to remind the listeners one more time, where can they go to find your work?
Well, the best thing to do is go to your search engine, Google or whatever, and type in outstanding investments. And outstanding investments, and that should take you to the Agora Financial website. And start with outstanding investments. It's $49 a year. It's less than $1 a week. I think I give you a lot of value for your, for your 90 cents or whatever that is every week. And I'll send you an email. I'll send you a monthly issue. And then if you like what you see, you can move on up the food chain to energy and scarcity investor. But it's all part of Agora Financial out of Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm the energy and minerals guy, and I love what I do. And I love having smart readers, and I love talking with smart interviewers.
I can tell exactly that you love what you do, Byron. And I just want to go ahead and thank you, for your time. And you've just given us and our listeners literally an amazing amount of insights. And I'm sure you could have provided a lot more. But, for an hour podcast, this is just fantastic.
Well, I figure you guys are going to run out of electrons, so we better stop. And the good news is it gives people a reason to come back some other time.